This occurred in 2017 and is 100% true, due to a multitude of factors, including a recent death of a close friend. I was unbearably depressed at this time in my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA, where I live. We thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was the off-season. It was late November. The weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty, besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. Our first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island. So we immediately checked into our motel, though that word hardly does the place justice. I call it a motel because all the doors to the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality our room was one of the 20 to 30 quaint guest house looking buildings, arranged in sort of a horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe. If you walked dead straight, you reached the room we were given, essentially on the corner before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path led to the street, the other further into the secluded maze of rooms. After a day of exploring and having just finished dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left-hand turn, and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears, and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them I just need to go to sleep. And I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. And then I woke up to my mom saying my name. A harsh whisper. The room had two beds, my parents' bed closer to the door and mine further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her, considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over. "What?" I asked. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the curtains, I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who was she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking to see a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. I know this is Let's Not Meet, and you are reading this knowing a creepy thing is going to happen. It's in the title, but understand how horribly startling it is to be on an island in the middle of the ocean and wake up to see a hooded stranger looming over you. This moment seemed to last forever. Life isn't like movies, where characters unleash a blood-curdling scream. Sometimes the only thing that comes out is something panicked and guttural. My mom's words became low and severe as she said my dad's name in a dire voice I've never heard her use before. Then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew two things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and is not acting in any sort of way that I can understand. As opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago. The series of events that unfolded when my hulking ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly we were out the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him, get him." My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline, "I'm going to fucking kill you." I ran down the other path toward the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder, but it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head low. He gets really close to me, and I hear him say, "It's a fucking kid." Now here's the explanation. Some young teen, tall and lanky as I am in my 20s, wearing all black including a black hoodie, went into the wrong room. Our room. The one time my parents just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he entered, and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie, thought he was me. Assumably, leaving the room in a depressive state. And when the hooded figure crouched, that was him realized his mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs this kid, who is now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with murder in his eyes. So to the now traumatized kid from Catalina Island, I look forward to reading your Let's Not Meet of this same event from your perspective.
About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who decidedly was not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all that would change a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, for a weeknight, with little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back down to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say that he was dance walking, heading straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how graceful he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could see his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painful wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on him. He didn't move. Once I had put about a half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance in the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I looked away from him for more than 10 seconds, so it was clear he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him, and then he started moving towards me. He took giant exaggerated tiptoe steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point that I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there completely frozen as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped, about a car length away from me, still smiling, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to my mind. What I meant to say was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. But what came out was a whimper. What the fuck? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they certainly can hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance walking away, just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way. And this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home I kept glancing over my shoulder. I was expecting to see a stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went on another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see.
Okay, so backstory. I go to a high school with about 500 people. This happened during my sophomore year. I'm a junior now. This might be not as extreme as other let's not meet posts, but this is something that still terrifies me, even a year later. Mark had other issues before this happened. He started cutting his arms in class. I was sitting 2 seats away from him and watched the blood just roll down his arm. He ended up being reported to the office. It was sent to the YOC for about a month, if I'm right. The YOC is the Youth Opportunity Center. It's basically a mental hospital juvenile center for kids. He came back and he seemed fine. He said he was never suicidal, that he only cut his arms for attention, which made sense for him because of his kinda messed up childhood. On the day everything happened, I had no clue about anything, but during my 6-hour class, the school resource officer appeared at the door of the classroom. One of my friends was standing behind me. The SRO told my teacher that he needed me immediately. I had no clue what was going on. I just thought I was being randomly drug tested, as it's pretty common in my school. I tried asking why we were going to the office and got no response. He took the 2 of us into the conference room, where 2 police officers were standing. They questioned me first. As I walked into the room, he shut and locked the door behind me. One of the police officers blocked the door, and the other blocked the window. I was petrified. I had no clue what was happening. This conversation happened like this. Have you heard anything today? About what? There were threats made against our school. Your name came up in a conversation. What do you mean my name came up in a conversation? I haven't heard anything. Who made the threats? And who said I would know anything about it? Mark made the threats. When we questioned some other people, your name popped up. They said you might know something. Who said my name? We can't tell you. I understand that they probably couldn't tell me who said it due to confidentiality reasons. But it's so frustrating to be locked in a room with 3 police officers who are acting like you've done something wrong, especially when you haven't. To this day, I still have no clue who mentioned my name. I have heard nothing. The only class I have with him is 5th period, and he wasn't there today. We don't talk outside of the class, and the only reason we talk in the class is because we sit at the same table, so we have to work together some days. Are you sure? I'm positive. I don't know anything. All of this is news to me. Okay, you're free to go. They opened the door, took my friend in, and I went back to class. I was kind of in shock. As soon as I walked through my class door, everyone was bombarding me with questions about what had happened. I ignored them and put my head down for the rest of the class. Later that night, I saw on Facebook that the school had posted a message. I don't remember what it was exactly, due to it being deleted. From my recollection, it said something like this. Parents and students of our school. 2 students reported that another student had made threats against our school. We have handled the situation, and there's nothing to worry about. The actual post was longer, but I honestly don't remember it. I told my parents about everything that happened that day, and they immediately wanted more information. I couldn't give it to them. At that point, I didn't know about the hit list or his arrest. All I know was that SG had threatened to shoot up the school. The next day, everything hit the fan. I found out he had told people about his plans during first hour, and he was taken out of class and arrested during the 4th hour. He was going to do it during 5th hour. Start with the class he was in, which I was in too, and then he would head to the cafeteria. God, I still get chills when I think of this very moment. During lunch, my best friend came up to me and told me about the hit list Mark wrote, and showed her during the first hour. She didn't get the chance to tell me the day before. The other guy who was there confirmed everything. I was on it. I was the 3rd name down. Evidently, he described in detail how he would kill me. Luckily, someone stopped it from happening, or else I would be dead before I even got to graduate high school. To this day, I still don't know why he could have possibly wanted to kill me. I barely even spoke to this guy. I was polite in class if I had to work with him. We had no negative interactions, so I honestly have no clue what I did to make him so desperately want to kill me. As I understand it, he did have a gun in his locker. It wasn't a joke like his friends thought. He intended to do it. I was relieved that I was alive and that nothing happened. But I was also out of my mind with horror at the thought of someone plotting my death. About 2 weeks later, my dad and I go into Dollar General in our town. Keep in mind, my dad has no clue what Mark looks like. We walk in to buy something for dinner, and I see Mark. He's staring at me so intensely that I wanted to run out of the store. But I stuck close to my dad and told him to hurry. He looked at me confused, and I told him I would explain it later. Mark was following us around the store. I couldn't breathe. I don't have the words to describe how scared I was. My dad and I got what we needed, left the store, and got in the truck. As soon as I was in the truck and the doors were locked, my dad turned to me and asked, "Who was that? He looked like he wanted you dead." I replied that it was Mark. At this point, we were thoroughly panicked, not only because he was roaming free, but because he knew where I lived. We had security cameras, but knowing that person who had adamantly expressed his desire to kill you knows where you live is terrifying. The school has since acted like it never happened. In fact, one of the administrators told me and my family we were overreacting when we wanted to know if he'd be back at school because according to them, I was never in any real danger. Luckily, the kid is no longer at my school, and he is currently in some type of jail because he murdered his mother. He pushed her down the stairs and she was found dead in a body bag. Thankfully, he was caught, and I don't think he's going to get out anytime soon.
When I was about 8 years old, I was taking my dog for a walk through the neighborhood with my mom. It was maybe 11 p.m. We lived next to a swampy wood area on the edge of our neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan. I remember it being very silent and slightly windy. From down in the swamp, we heard somebody whistling at us. It sounded sort of like a bird, but each whistle was different enough where the lack of consistency made it human-like. The whistle sounded higher, then lower. I can't really describe it. My mom had a concerned, slightly terrified look on her face, and grabbed my hand and said, "We have to go inside, quickly." I didn't understand because I was too young. After a while, though, I kind of forgot about it. 2 years later, I was taking my dog out again, late at night. There was a large bush that could easily obscure a human behind it just next to my front door. As I was finishing my walk, the whistling noise started again. Same pitch, same consistency, same human-like tone. As soon as I heard it, chills went through my spine as I remembered exactly the feeling of seeing my mom, terrified, looking into the swamp at something I couldn't see. Maybe she couldn't see it either. I ran inside as fast as possible. Years went by, and I thought about it less and less. I told only a handful of people, and eventually it slipped my mind. Fast forward to last summer. I'm 24, started dating my girl Sarah. We moved out to South Dakota for work. For Independence Day, we decided to go to Pierre, South Dakota and watch the fireworks along the bank of the Missouri River. There was a free camping spot behind a hospital where you could pitch a tent, hang out, and see the fireworks up the river. We were nearest to the end of the campground, and there were very few people around us. As it was getting dark, the fireworks began. They were pretty far away, so the illumination they brought was very little. Thus, we had to sit right on the edge of the river to be able to see them. A huge thunderhead was moving in and a storm was imminent, so the air seemed electric and the wind started picking up. The atmosphere was eerie, to say the least. The police boats herded all the other boats off the river and had left our area to do that elsewhere. Most of the other campers walked up the river to have a better view of the fireworks. But Sarah and I stayed back and were drinking PBR tall boys and kicking it. Suddenly, we heard the sound of paddling, methodically dipping into the water. We saw a figure steering a canoe about 20 meters offshore. Sarah decided to go get more beers from the car, leaving me alone to stare at this mysterious person. And then, of course, they whistled at me. My entire body was frozen and covered in goosebumps. It was the exact same whistler from my childhood, more than a decade earlier. I looked at the figure, but it was much too dark to discern who it could be. They were wearing a hat. When they were perpendicular to the shore from me, they stopped paddling, turned the canoe to face me, and whistled right at me. I was frightened. I stood up and shouted, "Who are you?" They didn't say anything, just whistled a couple more times, turned the canoe 180 degrees, and paddled out of sight. I'm a videographer, so I already had my camera by my side and was taking video of the fireworks. As the canoe was almost out of sight, I grabbed my camera and got a shot of them whistling as they went away. When Sarah came back from getting beers, she was very confused why I was freaked out. When I explained, she was freaked out a bit too. I was convinced we would both be murdered that night. How did this whistling person follow me after 14 years? All the way to South Dakota? Was it a coincidence? Why was it the same whistling noise? Who was that person and where did they go? So many questions still unanswered. To this day, I am more afraid of being outside in the dark where I might hear that whistling again. I'm open to any explanations. The whistling person has haunted me since I was a boy, and I can't explain it to this day. The user has footage of the whistler. He was too scared to point the camera in their direction, but instead pointed his microphone in the direction of him. Using headphones is advised.